Greetings, everyone. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm really happy to be here today with my guest. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies what it means to combine law, service, and advocacy. Beth Perez is the Director of Intake and Pro Bono Services at the Support Center for Child Advocates in Philadelphia, where she recruits, trains, and supports volunteer attorneys and paralegals who represent hundreds of children each year in the child welfare system. She also maintains her own caseload representing children as a guardian ad litem. In addition to that incredibly important work, Beth teaches child welfare law as adjunct faculty at Villanova Law and Drexel. She's a licensed social worker and somehow manages to serve in what feels like half the leadership roles across the Philadelphia and Pennsylvania Bar Associations. Beth, when I read through your CV, I honestly had one question, and that is, do you sleep?
Barely, barely,
Yeah.
but mainly because of my 2-year-old. So
Yes, rightfully so. Yes. Well, I'm really grateful that you're here today to talk with us, with with our audience about what's so very important to have a conversation around, which is trauma, professional resilience, and how attorneys, especially those doing deeply meaningful work, can sustain themselves while serving others. So, great big welcome to you. I'm so happy to have you here on the show.
thanks, Courtney. Thank you for having me, and thank you for creating a space for this important conversation that I think is often overlooked in the law practice. We're talking about it more in the public interest space, but not in all of law. And I think it is relevant to all of the law
Yeah,
practice.
yeah, I do for sure. So I'd like to begin by just sharing with listeners a bit about the work that you do at the Support Center for Child Advocates.
Sure. So the Support Center has been around since 1977. So we are coming up on 50 years.
Mhm.
And we work specifically in Philadelphia County, where we provide legal representation to children in the child welfare system who may have experienced abuse or neglect. And we have a really unique model that is a volunteer model. So we pair master's level social workers up with pro bono volunteer attorneys. And some of those volunteers may have little to no experience in the child welfare system, working with children. It's a very niche part of the law. It's very multidisciplinary. So we're working with a lot of social workers, social service providers, doctors, therapists, case handlers, um, which is unique. And we're dealing with a lot of trauma.
Mhm.
Not only the trauma that a child may experience from abuse or neglect, but the trauma of possibly being removed from their family and their community,
Yeah.
inter-system, involvement. A lot of these families are involved in multiple systems, whether it's the child welfare system and criminal justice system, included in the education system. They may be experiencing poverty. So there's a lot of institutional racism that comes into play, which does impact not only individual trauma, but community trauma. And a lot of that trauma then resurfaces in secondary trauma for the practitioners that are doing this work.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, just listening to you talk about what's involved and the heaviness of the work that you do, I'm feeling it, and I imagine that it takes a certain type of lawyer to be drawn to this type of work. Um, I know that you've been practicing this line of work for a while now. I'm curious to know what, in your opinion, what are some of the parts of this type of work that make it so meaningful for you and for other attorneys?
Yeah, so as you mentioned in your intro, I'm also a licensed social worker, and I started practicing this work as a child advocate social worker.
Yeah.
I was drawn to do this type of work um, back in college, I was a psychology major. I found it very fascinating to, look at families, family dynamics. And I had an interest in the law as well. So this was kind of the perfect avenue because it combined the two.
Mhm.
Um, and I think in terms of volunteering, I mean, the initial draw is you're working with children.
Yeah.
That's a big draw for people in general. People like helping kids. It is a very unique way of volunteering because you are using your legal skills.
Hmm.
Um, I think people are immediately drawn because they're like, this is a feel good thing.
Right.
And then they get into the work and they realize there are not always positive outcomes, and
Yeah.
positive outcomes look different depending on the family.
Right.
It's not always every family reunifies. It's not always every child gets adopted or has a stable placement.
Hmm.
Sometimes a positive aspect is my client felt comfortable and safe enough with me to come to court and talk to me about their story. And that's a huge win.
Yeah.
But when I talked to a volunteer yesterday who was getting so frustrated, the case was mainly about truancy and not going to school. And she just felt like this system is failing this kid and the family just doesn't care right now
Mhm.
because it shouldn't really be in court. The only thing is this kid's just not getting to school, but no one's providing any services to help this kid get to school. And I feel like I'm failing this kid because what help am I giving?
Hmm.
And it was kind of a hard conversation of talking about the system, talking about the flaws in the system, and talking about trying everything you can. And sometimes it feels like not enough, but it's all we can do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that comes in a lot with like compassion fatigue, which we'll talk about a little bit,
Yeah.
some burnout, cumulative stress, all of these things. And it just kind of all comes at once.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely want to explore secondary trauma. I know that shows up in a lot of different ways for attorneys, depending on what type of work you're practicing. But what I heard you say, a couple of things I wanted to kind of parse apart is that we may not feel like we're doing enough. And I think as attorneys, I know for myself, especially when you care, and in this case, I mean, you're that caring factor for children, I think, can be so strong that we can be really hard on ourselves, like not feeling like we're doing enough. And to your point, sometimes we're working within such tight confines that we have to sort of change the way, maybe reframe the way we look at a case, like what we maybe have in place for what we feel like would be an optimal outcome, that given what we're dealt, that we have to know that it may have to be enough. So I think that in and of itself, I would probably have to, it would take some getting used to. And something else in terms of getting used to that came up when you, for me, I was curious about when you were talking, is that you started out doing this work as a social worker. And I imagine that this isn't the type of work that you do, and then once you walk out the door of your office or your office building, that you leave it at work. I imagine that it follows you home and can really impact your own life. Did you notice early on in your career, or even now, as seasoned as you are in this work, do you notice the ways in which this type of work and just how much trauma you're dealing with day to day impacts you in your own life?
Oh, yeah. So when I started as a social worker right out of grad school, I was in my early 20s. It was my first like real job.
Mhm.
First job as a social worker. And even though I interned here, I didn't have a full caseload. And it took me a good, I would say 8 months to a year to not just go home crying every day because of the things I was reading, seeing. Um, the secondary traumatic stress was just very clear. And, the definition of secondary traumatic stress is the emotional duress you feel when exposed to trauma or the suffering of someone else. So you
Mhm.
kind of take on that trauma. You may
Even
not
though
have
it's not like our head-on direct personal trauma, it's as if we're feeling somebody else's trauma. It comes through.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you can experience that in different ways. You can experience it in exactly what we were talking about, this compassion fatigue of feeling like I'm doing everything I possibly
Yeah.
can and nothing is happening.
Yeah.
Feeling moral distress of the world is a bad place. Everything is horrible,
Hmm.
which right now is a scary place. The world is a scary place, and we
Yeah.
feel that, and we
Yeah.
feel that heaviness. So not only those doing the work, so our staff right now are taking on so much with doing this work, but then also are dealing with not only in their own lives, the scariness of the world right now, but in their clients' lives. So,
Yeah.
we work with a lot of immigrant clients. It's really scary right now. We're looking at like protections for them.
Hmm.
Even coming to court, what does that look like for them?
Right.
And then we're taking on that stress and coming home, worried about our clients every day, and then worried about maybe our friends every day and like how that compounds. There's also people that may experience secondary trauma in more real ways in the body.
Hmm.
So the same ways you experience stress, for me, it's like heart pounding, tenseness, my body immediately like folds in it on itself. My appetite changes. There's some people who are sluggish, can't get out of bed.
Yeah.
But there's also, you think of the extremes of nightmares, night terrors.
Yeah.
I've had odd situations when I started this work of I was having like nightmares about the experiences of my clients as if they were my experience.
Right. Not you're worrying about how you're going to do in representing your clients, but actually feeling their pain, taking on
Yes,
their pain and
yes,
imagining what
which
they're going through.
is wild, and terrifying. It's kind of like reliving the memories, and they're not my memories to relive. But because I've been working with these clients, we work with a lot of victim witnesses in criminal matters. So we're seeing a lot of the details, and we're prepping with these clients in the district attorney's office and hearing their stories over and again, and watching our client have to relive that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
really traumatic. And we have to, in those moments, keep a straight face
Right. Right.
because we don't want to look like, we don't want to look like we're upset or they're upsetting us
Right.
saying things.
Right.
So it's a lot to take on, and you have to have a strong face when you're doing this work.
Hmm.
Um, so that time when you're going home is when you can finally release, but we all have lives
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So it definitely shows up in a lot of ways. I think you mentioned something about, you know, not feeling like you're not doing enough. And at the
Yeah.
beginning, and I see this with a lot of volunteers, especially a lot of new volunteers, when the system kind of butts up to like as much as you can do, then you push your own boundaries to try and, well, I can personally do these things. So we see our clients who are experiencing food insecurity. So then, during COVID, I was buying groceries for one of my clients. And it got to the point where like I was having trouble affording my own groceries.
Yeah.
And I had 100 some odd clients that I can't buy groceries for everyone. And also, it's not beneficial to them because they're not learning, like, here are all the options to me. They're saying, oh, I'll just go to Miss Beth. That's not helping our
Right.
client
It
develop
becomes
their.
a, I mean, as a human being, as you as the human being, and in your role as an attorney, it's a real slippery slope, I
It
think.
is.
And it's not like you have this one family or this one child that you're helping. That it could really spiral, and I could
Yeah,
see like
and
how
it's
do you,
not part of our role
right,
too. I think
right,
that that's a piece in building trust and rapport with your client is them understanding your role
yeah, yeah,
and us understanding our role. And in part of our role is sending them to the right resources
right,
and not providing them
right.
because it's not part of being an attorney or being their child advocate social worker.
I remember us when we spoke at Villanova Law, when we were on a panel of speakers, and we talked to some of the law students about the importance in mental well-being and taking good care of ourselves. It's really imperative that we be clear about our role and that we have healthy boundaries so that it doesn't become something where we're giving so much, putting so much into our work that we become depleted. Because when we're in a bad place, whether it's financially because we're bending over backwards for our clients, or mentally or physically or emotionally, it's going to come back not only to bite us, but it's going to affect our ability to do the good work that we want to do for our clients. So there's a lot of moving parts. And I think getting back to what you were saying with the way secondary trauma shows up, it comes back to awareness, that we need to have self-awareness. We need to not only be aware of our clients' feelings and their physical health and financial security, but we also need to be aware of how our work is impacting our lives, and how is it showing up in our bodies. I know you mentioned that a lot of times it does show up through the body. And in the work that I do as a mindfulness teacher, I help attorneys who are working in incredibly stressful roles like yourself, how to deepen their ability to notice at any given moment when they're feeling the weight of the world or the weight of their clients' lives and situations. They're feeling it within their bodies. And how can we calm our nervous systems? How can we calm our minds? Because like you said, our clients, if they start to see us unravel, that's one more layer of uncertainty for them, or one more layer of stress or trauma that they have to deal with. So it really does, a lot does fall on lawyers. And I think that sometimes lawyers don't realize the exposure to that exposure to trauma can have in their lives when they choose to go in these certain practice areas. So are there some signs? I know you mentioned some signs that showed up in your life when you were working as a social worker in the beginning, and then how it filtered into your role now. But are there other signs that lawyers can sort of be on the lookout for, or maybe their colleagues, if they see something? Are there certain things that you would say, be on the lookout for these?
Yeah, so there's a lot of symptoms of secondary traumatic stress, and I would say it's individual. It's depends on the individual of
Mhm.
how it shows up.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of them mirror depressive symptoms. If you know the symptoms of depression,
Yeah.
fatigue, sleep problems, cynicism, hopelessness, a lot of numbing and feeling this jaded numbness
Hmm.
because you're reading the same things and you're seeing these things over and over.
Right.
And then the opposite side, easily agitated or irritated, easily startled or hypervigilance.
Yeah.
Um, we talked about boundary issues, relationship issues. Those can kind of meld into your personal life as well.
Hmm.
Um, and then the physical kind of manifestation and elements can be impacted as well. There is this this thing called the window of tolerance, which
Yeah.
I really like to talk about because my colleague speaks on it so well, and it just spoke to me of not only how to talk to our clients and understanding when they may be outside their window,
Yeah.
but like for our own self. So the window of tolerance is this kind of, I think of it as like a three-part, like above, middle, and below. And in that middle is your best self, when
Mhm.
you can really take in information, when you feel like you're understanding things, you're
Yeah.
calm, you feel relaxed.
Yeah.
Um, and then you go up, and that hyper uh
Like you go into like fight or flight
it's
where,
fight or flight, it's agitated,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
you're really on edge.
Your
Uh,
your sympathetic nervous system
is
is like
it,
cranked up
it's
full
so
force.
cranked up.
Yeah.
And your mind is racing. You
Yeah.
may be, I see this in our kids, maybe at court, and they can't sit still. They're
Yeah.
jittery.
Yeah.
They need to move. And then the hypo is you're just shutting down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Your head may be down. You're just not listening. And
Yeah.
if you think about yourself in these two ways, you can't take in any information.
Right. Right.
And as an attorney, if you're heightened, if you're up there, you're not
Yeah.
listening to your client. You're trying to get your information out there.
Yeah.
If you're hypo, you're not taking in information. You just really want to get this done. You're neither of your best selves.
Right.
And to get yourself back into that perfect like homeostasis,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in that hyper state, maybe breathing,
Yeah.
to lower those cortisol levels.
Yeah.
Um, and then those hypo, that tired, get up and take a walk, get your
Yeah.
energy moving a little bit, step away from your desk, take
Yeah.
a drink of water. Um, it's really important to kind of think about this because not only when you're talking to your client and taking information, but say you're at the bar of the court and you're already in these heightened stages, you are not your best self.
Yeah.
And that not only looks bad on you, your
Yeah.
client's looking at you like you are not adequately representing them.
Yeah.
You think about professional competence, it really impacts not only your confidence in getting things done, but you're just basically running on fumes at that point.
Yeah. Well, I talk about this a lot that the ABA Rule 1.1 of the Model Rules of Professional Conduct require us to provide competent representation. If we're running on fumes, if we're not able to think clearly, if we're not taking good physical care of ourselves, if we're struggling emotionally or mentally, we can't comply with the mandate of Rule 1.1. So there are a number of ways to calm our nervous systems. And what you're saying, it's physiological. Like we are, it's called, we have what the amygdala hijack. So like we can't do that high level of thinking that we need to when our nervous systems are completely out of whack. But as you were saying, we have different tools that we can use to relax the body, to relax the mind, or in those moments when maybe we're numbing out, we're shutting down, we can practice self compassion, we can open ourselves. But I think that in order to open ourselves to, to so much vulnerability, to so much that can be challenging, we need a way to ground ourselves. We need to sort of strengthen our backbone, so to speak, not physically, but we need to ground ourselves. And if we don't have a way to anchor ourselves, to strengthen our ability to be with this challenging work, then it's really easy to get knocked over by the
I,
intensity. So I think it's so important that there's awareness around not only self-care. I know that you often we both talk about the importance of self-care, but also what I think can make a night and day difference is organizational care, that the culture of the workplace, that there has to be healthy practices that are implemented in order to promote well-being in the collective workplace. So I'm just curious if you can briefly talk about some ways that, in addition to what you were speaking about as it pertains to individuals and them fostering better self-care, what are some ways that organizations can promote greater well-being in the workplace?
yeah, I completely agree. I feel like self-care is important. But you can't do self-care if your organization doesn't allow you to do self-care and doesn't
Right.
provide opportunity and space for that or respect for that.
Yeah.
I think it's a responsibility of organizations to provide that and to protect workers.
Mhm.
I think it's not only important and a responsibility, but it's also better for the agency to
Yeah,
have people stay.
yeah,
People are going to get burned out and leave. Volunteers we have are not going to come back
yeah,
if we're not recognizing symptoms and providing opportunities for them to take breaks, to do work in smaller shifts,
yeah,
to lower caseloads, to destigmatize secondary trauma.
yeah.
Um, I think that's done with a lot of understanding and transparency
Hmm.
within the organization, seeking feedback from staff of what
Yeah,
would be beneficial. Being on leadership, we've been really working on that, on listening to our staff, because we can, there's 7 of us in a room. We could think this is going to be great for our
yeah,
staff. But really, it might not be what they need.
right.
We always joke here, we're like, a pizza party is not going to solve our
Yeah,
secondary
yeah,
trauma.
yeah. No, leaving candy on your people, on the desk of your people. I mean, that's not going to cut it. Like that's sweet, but you need to dive below the surface. And to your point, places where I worked, it was like a revolving door because it was their way or the highway, and that's really not. It's not something that makes for sustainable work, and you lose really good talent, and where does that leave you? I mean, it pays off not only for the individuals but the collective whole of these organizations when they truly, like what you're saying, you listen to what the needs are of your teams, of your people, and you find ways to support them. And what I think is so surprising is it doesn't have to be a heavy dive per se. It can be these small ways that when your teams and your people feel as if you care for them, that you truly care in their well-being, that means a lot. And why wait until everyone is just kind of like working themselves to the ground and can't do the good work? You can be attentive throughout and avoid everyone from collapsing, from the whole organization collapsing. So I think sometimes maybe it's just ignorance or people stuck in their ways, but to know that you don't have to kind of like break the bank. There are really, really profound ways that are simple that can help people immensely.
Yeah, I think that at the cost zero money is respecting people's boundaries.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about boundaries, and creating your own is one thing. So maybe creating a space where we talk about boundaries,
Mhm.
what they are, why they are important, and in a way of how do boundaries benefit our clients,
Yeah.
and then respect them from the top down. So leadership and supervisors are not calling you on vacation.
Mm.
They are not calling you after hours.
Yeah.
There are some people, as simple as something I love that our executive director, Lisa Behrman, does is she has just a little sentence at the end of her email that says, my workday may look different from yours. You do not have to respond to this email if it reaches you outside of hours. Because she works outside of hours. She kind of changes her hours. She's a
Mhm.
working mom as well. So sometimes she has to go pick up her kids at 4, but then we'll log back on. But she's not expecting us when we get an email from her, when you're getting an
Right.
email from the executive director, to respond right away.
That's so
Because
funny.
she's,
Oh, sorry.
yeah.
It's funny you're mentioning that because just this morning I saw a colleague's when I sent her an email, and the message I got back at the bottom of her email said that in order to truly be present for my family, I no longer respond to emails on Saturday and Sunday. And I was like, wow, like there's a certain level of respect that they're carving out that time to be with their family, to protect their well-being. And I know that when we, even though it may feel at first selfish, that that's how we keep ourselves going. That's how
Right.
we can stay in the game and make this type of work sustainable.
And I think her
Yeah.
putting that in the bottom of the email also shows respect for her clients that I'm not ignoring your email. I
Right.
will respond to you
Right.
when I get back. So
Yeah.
it's, so the next 2 days, I just might not have seen it. And that's why I'm not responding. So
Yeah.
you're transparent within those boundaries. So I think that is just an easy, free way to respect. And it really goes a long way,
Yeah. Yeah.
people, because I was able to take a vacation last week and didn't have people contacting me. I was able to step away and take my email off my phone. So yeah,
Yeah,
it just
I think there's a congratulations in order as we're sitting here and you're reminding me happy anniversary, right? Was it your
yes,
anniversary?
thank
So
you.
yes, yes, it's you jogged my memory with that one. So, well, I want to be respectful of time boundaries. I know having just come back from vacation that your to-do list is probably overflowing, but I did want to share with our listeners for lawyers who are feeling drawn to this work and are looking to get involved with child advocates, how's best for them to get information about how they can get involved?
Yes, please contact me. And Courtney, I hope you share my email, but it
I
is
will.
just
Yeah.
B Perez at sccalaw.org. Shoot me an email. I'll send you everything. Our training is all on demand and you get 6 CLEs. Once you become a volunteer attorney with us, you get free CLEs through us. We do a ton of trainings, a lot of secondary trauma trainings for our volunteers. And you'll do a court observation and do your clearances, and then you can take a case. We do also have an upcoming spring event, March 26th from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Crystal Tea Room in Philadelphia. We will be highlighting our distinguished advocates, including distinguished clients, and we will be celebrating with a silent auction to raise money to help fund our organization. It's going to be really fun, really exciting. And if you want to learn more about child advocates, this is a great way to do it. A lot of our staff will be there. A lot of current volunteers will be there, so you can talk to them about their work. If you're interested in that, you can just go onto our website and register for tickets. And our website is sccalaw.org. Or you can email me about that too. I'm happy to send information about that.
I'll make sure to make it a light lift for all our listeners and viewers, and
Thank
I'll
you.
have all the important links embedded in the show notes.
Great.
So, and I want to say, just from having been to some of the events that you've led, that the people that I've met, your colleagues, one is nicer than the other. And I really, anytime I get to spend with you is a true joy and an honor. So I feel
Feeling is mutual.
I'm really grateful to have had you on this show,
Thank you,
and I
Courtney.
just want to commend you on the amazing work that you're doing. It's so
Oh,
important.
thank you, Courtney. And I've loved meeting you. Our paths have crossed so many times, and it makes me feel very hopeful for the profession
Yeah,
that we're kind of changing mindsets and
yeah,
stigmas.
yeah. I feel the same way. I got goosebumps as you said it, but I do think that as challenging as the world feels and is in so many ways right now, that little by little, the work that we're doing in our own right and that so many others are building on is having a positive impact in really significant ways.
Yeah. Well,
So
thanks,
thank you so
Courtney.
much. Thank you everyone for being here and take the best of care.